Father takes son to hospital, but is shocked when he discovers the incredible truth about his past. Tom's heart pounded as he gripped the handlebars of Jake's bike, his son's laughter filling the air like a childhood anthem. But the jubilant spell shattered in an instant. A sharp scream pierced the sunny warmth, followed by the crunch of skin against pavement. Jake had fallen. Tom raced to his son, panic enveloping him like a thick fog. Blood streamed from the scrape on Jake's knee, an urgent reminder of how fleeting these moments of boyhood bliss could be. Rushing to the hospital, Tom's mind raced in two directions. The first was the visceral worry for Jake, and the second came from a place of profound unease that settled deep in his stomach. The hospital. Stylistic memories flooded back, their harsh fluorescent lights, the sterile smell, and the dull beeping of machines that, in the hands of a child, felt like foreshadowing. Each step through the entrance felt heavy, burdened with past echoes of betrayal. As they waited in the emergency room, Jake's spirit remained unbroken despite the pain. He began chatting about his bike ride, barely seeming concerned that he needed medical attention. Meanwhile, Tom's gaze fell upon Dr. Emily Carter. Her calming presence was oddly reminiscent of someone he wanted to forget, a doctor, and one who commanded respect in the community. A reminder of his estranged father, who chose wealth over family. Anger boiled beneath Tom's surface. Could he confront this ghost again? Could he speak to someone who represented everything he despised just because she donned a white coat? "Hey there," an old man said softly, breaking Tom's reverie. "Tom, isn't it? You're Joe's son." The words whipped through Tom like a cold wind, trailing off old memories. He tensed, eyes narrowing instinctively. "I used to work with your father. Can't say he was a model dad, though." The regret in the old man's tone was palpable. As he shared stories, Tom felt a rush of conflicting emotions rising within him. Each tale about his father was like a dagger, reopening wounds he thought had healed. He struggled against anger, which intertwined with a flicker of nostalgia, a rebellion between what was and what should have been. The old man revealed a hidden legacy tied to the very hospital he stood in, a family connection he had been entirely oblivious to. Tom clenched his fists, his heart racing. What else hadn't he known? The silent storm inside him roared louder. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Jake, glancing up, asked why his dad seemed so distracted. His innocent curiosity tugged at Tom, igniting an awareness of the walls he had built around his own grief. Could he finally unveil the truth of their legacy? Or would he bury it deeper to shield himself and Jake? The poised balance of old resentments and the whispers of possibility loomed like a heavy curtain. One wrong move could send it collapsing down. The clock ticked louder, each moment stretching into infinite tension. Then, the nurse swung open the door, calling Jake's name. With a rush of warmth and confusion in his chest, Tom felt himself on the precipice of a decision. Would he embrace the shadows of his past and reveal the truth to Jake? Or would he fold into the suffocating familiarity of his old patterns? Everything hung in that moment, leaving Tom breathless as answer reverberated back to him, but an answer he wasn't quite prepared to confront. Tom followed Jake into the examination room, a trained smile plastered on his face despite the torrent of emotions roiling within. As he settled into a chair against the cold clinical wall, he heard the muffled sounds of Jake talking to the nurse, his carefree chatter a stark contrast to Tom's turmoil. He caught glimpses of his son being examined, his small body triumphant in the face of adversity. Was this the kind of resilience Tom had failed to inherit? His brow furrowed as he considered the implications. He had decided long ago that family ties were not to be trusted, that vulnerability would only lead to disappointment. But watching Jake, he couldn't deny the flicker of possibility. Perhaps confronting this legacy could help him reclaim a part of himself that had long been buried. As the nurse bandaged Jake's knee and provided minor reassurances, Tom felt the need for connection intensifying within him. What was it that had driven his father to leave, to cultivate a life of wealth and prestige while abandoning the essence of family? The old man's stories echoed in his mind, unveiling a familial history now juxtaposed against the present he was forging with Jake. Would sharing these revelations strengthen his bond or fracture it? Jake emerged, buoyant despite the bandage. "Dad, look, I'm a warrior now," he exclaimed, proudly showing off his knee. Tom chuckled, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and dread. "A warrior, huh? Just like those knights we read about." "Yeah, but I'll be careful next time." Jake's earnestness pierced through Tom's lingering indecision. A sudden urge to share the hidden complexities of family surged within him. Perhaps Jake needed a more honest version of his father, a man who didn't shy away from the hard truths. "Jake," he started, his voice soft but steady, "there's something I want to tell you about our family. You see, your grandpa, well, he wasn't always there for me." The words hung thick in the sterile air, pulling at the thread of honesty he was desperate to weave into their relationship. Before he could continue, the door opened again and Dr. Emily Carter stepped into the room, her calm demeanor grounding the tension. Her presence reminded him of the old man's revelations, the whispers of a past that intertwined their lives in unforeseen ways. "Jake, it looks like your knee is going to be just fine," she said, her voice warm and reassuring. Tom felt his equilibrium shift. The woman before him, despite her professional robe, stirred echoes of pain and resentment. As she completed the examination and prescribed ointments, Tom couldn't help but scrutinize her. This wasn't just a random physician. This was an embodiment of his past, a link to his father's choices. Would he confront her as well? Could he peel back the layers of resentment to understand this tangled legacy? Or would it only exacerbate his unresolved anger? A single question danced at the edge of his thoughts. Could confronting both his past and the emotions it stirred lead to a new path, not just for himself, but for Jake too? As he prepared to leave, Tom resolved to speak to her, to mention the stories, to maybe even ask questions he had silenced for years. His hand hovered at the door handle, and just as he took a breath to step out, he caught Jake's eyes, full of heroism and trust. That gaze anchored him, nudging him towards the door. "Let's go home, buddy," Tom managed, feeling the weight of his decision to face the truth about their history and how it shaped their future together. But a new wave of anxiety swept over him as he realized the conversation with Dr. Carter loomed ahead. Would he finally be ready to confront that chapter of his life? As they exited the hospital, the fluorescent lights receding behind him, the question reverberated in his mind, leaving him hungering for clarity amidst the chaos. What revelations awaited him once he engaged with the narrative that had dictated his life for so long? The car ride home was punctuated by the familiar sound of Jake's voice, a comforting hum against the backdrop of Tom's swirling thoughts. But even the innocent chatter couldn't dispel the weight that now sat heavily in Tom's chest. He glanced at the road ahead, trying to distinguish between the fear of facing the past and the hope of finally understanding it. "Are we still going to have pizza for dinner, Dad?" Jake asked, his eagerness cutting through Tom's somber reflection. Tom nodded, automatically agreeing, but his mind was elsewhere. He was preparing for a confrontation, not with a villain, but with his own history. A history that felt more like a noose than a foundation. What if confronting Dr. Carter didn't yield the closure he craved? What if it only opened old wounds, revealing the scars he had worked so hard to hide? As he turned into the driveway, the picturesque home they had made together mocked his internal conflict. It was supposed to be a safe haven, but it suddenly felt more like a cage. Once parked, Jake jumped out, excitement spilling over as he darted toward the front door, leaving Tom in the car anchored by uncertainty. He sat for a moment, replaying the earlier events in his mind. There was something different about Jake, something Tom had never explicitly recognized until now. The boy's resilience may have been a reflection of his own deep-seated need for acceptance, a craving to belong that he had buried under layers of emotional armor. If he asked Jake to carry the weight of the family's unresolved issues, would it crush him or mold him into an even stronger version of himself. Tom took a deep breath and stepped out, pushing the door closed behind him with a newfound determination. Inside, he found Jake already bouncing around the kitchen, already rifling through the cupboards for his favorite snack. In that moment, Tom realized that it wouldn't be long before Jake would face his own set of challenges, and how he approached those would be influenced by the lessons Tom imparted, especially about vulnerability. He grabbed the phone and dialed Dr. Carter's office, his heart pounding in his ears. The receptionist answered briskly, the sound of keys clicking rhythmically in the background. "Can I help you?" "Yes, I'd like to speak to Dr. Carter, please," Tom said, forcing steadiness into his voice. He felt the seconds stretch into an eternity while waiting. Each moment pulled him back to memories of his father, of secrets kept in the shadows longer than he had cared to acknowledge. Would he find courage in confronting them? A moment later, the receptionist informed him Dr. Carter was available. "Dr. Carter," he began. The weight of his words shifted his stance. "I need to speak with you about my father." An uncomfortable silence lingered on the line, as though the very mention of his father triggered unspoken tensions. "I can meet you if you'd like," she finally suggested, her tone a mixture of professionalism and something deeper. Perhaps she sensed the storm brewing in him, the clash between curiosity and dread. "Yes, I think that would be best," Tom replied, each word marking a critical step toward confronting the past. As he hung up, an oppressive mixture of anxiety and anticipation coursed through him. He glanced at Jake, who was climbing onto a kitchen stool, his small hands covered in flour from a failed baking experiment. The sight elicited a rare smile from Tom, as he witnessed his son's joyful innocence. But then, the reality washed over him again. For every moment of joy, there existed potential heartache. If confronting the past wasn't perilous, it wouldn't be worth the effort, right? That evening, under layers of pizza sauce and sizzling cheese, he promised himself that he would explore that past, not just for himself, but for Jake. Just as Jake displayed an innate courage to tackle life, Tom had his own journey of bravery to embark on. That resolve solidified as Tom looked into Jake's gleaming eyes, and for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, addressing these demons could forge a stronger line of honesty between them. But this revelation did not come without apprehension. What if the truths uncovered were more than either of them could handle? The tension grew in his chest as he pondered, believing he was destined for more than just a legacy of wounds. Эта мысль оставила его взволнованным и готовым к встрече, выходящей за рамки обычных ожиданий молодого отца. How far could he go to reclaim his narrative? The world awaited, and in the silence of his kitchen, he braced himself for what was to come next. The night stretched on, and with every tick of the clock, Tom's resolve was tested. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, each thought a heavy stone added to the burden he'd been carrying for years. The impending meeting with Dr. Carter loomed like a storm on the horizon, and Tom couldn't shake the feeling that the truth of his past might unravel everything he had built with Jake. As dawn broke, the sun cast an orange hue over the room, illuminating the shadows that felt familiar, yet suffocating. Tom rose from his bed with a sense of urgency, driven by the need to prepare not just for the confrontation with Dr. Carter, but also for the conversation about his father he'd never had. Would he discover pieces of himself he was unprepared to face? He moved through the house methodically, the routine of breakfast and getting Jake ready grounding him amidst the chaos in his mind. But even in his attempts at normalcy, flashes of memories crept in. His father's stern gaze, the echo of harsh words, the sense of inadequacy that had followed him into adulthood. Each recollection twisted in his gut like a tightening knot, urging him to act. "Dad, can we go to the park later?" Jake's voice broke through, full of youthful exuberance. Tom offered a smile, a momentary distraction from his turmoil. "Of course, buddy." But even as he spoke, he felt a pang of guilt. How could he enjoy time at the park while harboring such weighty secrets? After loading Jake into the car, Tom found himself gripping the steering wheel harder as they made the drive to Dr. Carter's office. The streets passed by in a blur, akin to the fleeting moments of his childhood he'd spent trying to impress an unyielding father. He glanced at Jake in the rearview mirror, his son's innocent enthusiasm radiating a light Tom felt dimmed by dark memories. When they arrived, Tom felt a rising tide of anxiety clawing at his stomach, but he knew he couldn't back down. This was a pivotal moment not only for him, but for Jake's future as well. As they walked into the clinic, Tom's heart raced. The antiseptic scent mixed with the unease in his chest created a concoction of apprehension. "Are you okay, Dad?" Jake asked, his eyes wide with concern. "Just getting ready to talk about some things. It'll be fine," Tom replied, doing his best to reassure not only Jake but himself. Dr. Carter was prompt, her presence immediately commanding the room. As Tom shared snippets of his past, stories tinged with pain and regret, he sensed the therapist's keen understanding. Her questions peeled back layers he had long shielded. "How did those experiences shape the person you are today?" she probed gently. Tom shifted uneasily, the answer bursting to the surface but obstructed by a lifetime of avoidance. "I thought I could just get through it, but I realize now it's more complex than that. I didn't want to repeat those patterns." As the conversation unfolded, Tom unearthed truths he had buried deep. Each revelation felt like a liberation, yet simultaneously a confrontation, pushing every twinge of discomfort to the forefront. "I don't want that legacy for Jake. I can't let history define him," he said, the determination in his voice hardening. Dr. Carter nodded, acknowledging the weight of his commitment. "Acknowledgement is key, Tom, but change requires action. You'll need to continue working on this, even after today." Tom left the office with a blend of clarity and confusion. He felt buoyed by the moments of honesty, but haunted by the magnitude of what he had yet to reconcile. Could he face the deepest shadows of his past and emerge a better father? He turned to Jake, who looked up at him expectantly. "Did you figure things out, Dad?" "I'm getting there," Tom replied, forcing a smile, his voice more certain than he felt. Inside, however, turmoil churned. How much truth would he share with Jake? And would facing the past reveal the man he hoped to be, or the father he feared he'd become? "Let's go to the park," he said abruptly, needing a moment of normalcy, a distraction from the quagmire of his thoughts. As they headed out, Tom's mind raced with the next questions. The meeting had peeled back layers, but now he faced the daunting task of integrating new insights into his everyday life. Would he break the cycle? Or would the past cling to him like an unwanted shadow? Perhaps the biggest revelation awaited him at the park, a realization that personal growth necessitated not just insight, but action. What choices would he make in the light of day? And what would Jake uncover about his own journey as they navigated these murky waters together? The sun hung high in the sky as Tom and Jake entered the park, its warm light a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside Tom. As they approached the playground, he watched Jake dash ahead, a kaleidoscope of energy and joy that stirred a mix of admiration and unease within him. Here was a child unburdened by the chains of history, a sharp reminder of what Tom yearned to protect. Tom settled onto a nearby bench, the wood warm beneath him, and leaned back, attempting to lose himself in the innocence of the moment. Yet his mind whirled with the promises of change and the whispers of unresolved pain. The conversation with Dr. Carter echoed persistently, urging him to confront the very essence of who he was, a man shaped by the shadows of his father's failure. As he observed Jake on the swings, a wave of guilt crashed over him. Every squeal of delight from his son served as a painful counterpoint to Tom's own childhood experience. He wondered if he could truly break free from his past. Could he genuinely change the narrative for Jake? Each fleeting smile from Jake ignited a fire of determination within him, and suddenly, the urge to act became overpowering. "Hey, buddy," Tom called out, waving his hand to catch Jake's attention. "Why don't we go over to the pavilion and grab some water?" Jake spun around, his face beaming with excitement. "Okay," he yelled back, racing toward Tom. As they moved, Tom decided this was the moment to share. If he was truly going to break the cycle, he must let Jake see the man he was, a father willing to confront imperfection. Once they reached the pavilion, Tom felt the weight of his decision pressing against him. "Jake," he began, choosing his words carefully, "there's something I need to talk to you about." His son tilted his head, curiosity shining in his eyes. "Is it about your past?" The unexpected intuition startled Tom. Perhaps children possess an innate ability to connect dots adults often overlook. "Kind of," he replied hesitantly. "It's about my father, and how he wasn't always the best dad. He made mistakes that hurt our family." A flicker of confusion passed over Jake's face. "Didn't you want to be different?" The child's question pierced Tom deeply. "Absolutely. I've always wanted to be the best father I could for you, and learning about my past is part of that," he explained, his voice steadier now. "I realized it's crucial to be honest with myself and with you. Sometimes I have to face the ugly parts of me." "Like how he yelled?" Jake ventured, his innocence cradling and understanding well beyond his years. "Yes, exactly like that," Tom affirmed. "And I want you to know that anger isn't the way. I promise to listen, to be here for you no matter what." Jake's brows furrowed. "So it's okay to mess up as long as you try to fix it?" Tom was taken aback by his son's insightful comment. Perhaps it was the innocence or his perceptive nature, but it encapsulated a lesson Tom wished he'd learned earlier. Yes, it's not just okay. It's part of learning how to be better. The weight on Tom's chest felt lighter somehow, sharing this moment with Jake. A realization dawning that opening up could create a bridge instead of a chasm. However, as they returned to the swings, Tom's heart raced with uncertainty. What about the deeper truth still hidden within him? Facing the past was one thing, but embracing the uncomfortable truths of his own failures was another. As they swung side by side, the sun cast long shadows behind them. Tom sensed the ebb of relief, but the lingering anxiety about facing the most challenging aspects of himself loomed like storm clouds on the horizon. Could he truly navigate this journey with honesty, courage, and vulnerability? The war within him raged, contemplating hidden pieces of his story no longer buried but begging for acknowledgement. And just as the thought settled in, Jake turned to him, eyes bright with excitement. "Dad, can we go to the museum next? I want to learn about space." Tom smiled, his heart warmed by Jake's enthusiasm, yet a flicker of doubt gripped him. "Sure, buddy, we can do that." But as they walked hand in hand, a nagging feeling crept in. Would exploring the wonders of the universe offer solace, or would it unveil further layers of his inadequacies? The journey to unearth the truth was only beginning, and Tom braced himself for the unknown revelations still waiting to surface. What other shadows remained unexamined, and how would they shape both Tom and Jake moving forward? As they stepped into the museum's cool, cavernous lobby, the sensation of entering another world washed over Tom. The towering exhibits loomed around them, each representing a facet of knowledge and exploration he could only grasp in glimpses. Jake's face lit up with wonder at the sight of a giant model of the solar system hanging from the ceiling, planets perfectly aligned, reflecting the excitement that pulsed through the air. "Look, Dad, can we go see that first?" Jake tugged at Tom's hand, pulling him toward the exhibit. As they strolled through the various displays, Tom felt a shift within him. Each exhibit beckoned him not just to learn about space, but to reflect on his own expanse, an inner universe filled with uncharted emotions and conflicts. He caught himself avoiding direct conversations with Jake about their shared history. Instead, he found himself tightly gripping the idea of being the perfect father, while running from the shadows lurking behind every triumphant achievement. "Do you think there's life on other planets?" Jake asked, gazing up at the planets swirling in their orbits. Tom opened his mouth to answer but hesitated. "I don't know if there's life, Jake. But sometimes, I think about how we all come from somewhere, and what we learn shapes who we are." This time he sought a deeper connection, one that necessitated transparency, knowing it was more important than ever to pull Jake into his thoughts. Jake's gaze narrowed slightly, attempting to decode his father's words. "Like you with your dad?" Tom swallowed hard. His past encroached upon him more fiercely than he expected. "Exactly like that. Every choice I make is influenced by him, and I want to make different choices for you." Jake's brow furrowed in contemplation. "You're being brave, Dad, just like the astronauts." Tom was momentarily taken aback by his son's perception. Kids' logic could be brutally acute. Perhaps it was Jake's innate way of connecting heritages. Yeah, I guess I am. But that's the hard part. Being brave means facing things that are ugly or scary. As they spent time absorbing the wonders of the cosmos, an unexpected weight settled deeper in Tom's mind. Admiring the cosmic journey, he couldn't shake off the feeling that to truly protect Jake, he had to venture beyond the light, into the areas cloaked by darkness. The comfort of ignorance was being pushed aside by the realization that each acknowledgement was a step toward a reality he could no longer avoid. They paused at a small exhibit devoted to the Apollo missions. Images of astronauts looking both terrified and exhilarated flashed across the screen. They left everything behind to go to space, Tom murmured, his voice reflective. They took risks for something greater. Like you're doing now, Jake suggested, his eyes wide as he grasped the implications of their discussion. A sharp pang of recognition struck Tom. Yes, it was like that. Here he was, unearthing his own truths, leaving behind the safety of denial. However, the enormity of the journey still loomed ahead, filled with moments he had yet to confront. Suddenly, a thought snagged on Tom's conscious mind. What if the past he believed he understood was missing pieces? What if digging deeper revealed truths about his father, that not only shaped his own childhood, but also contained secrets that could alter everything he thought he knew about himself? As he pondered, Jake danced around the various exhibits, unaware of the storm brewing within Tom. Each moment away from the innocence of Jake's excitement sank Tom deeper into contemplation, questioning whether facing these shadows was part of their journey together, or if confronting his father's legacy would send ripples through this newfound connection with Jake. "Dad, come see this," Jake's voice echoed, pulling Tom out of his thoughts. He turned, but what he saw wasn't just another exhibit. It was a wall of family names, stories immortalized in the fabric of the museum's narrative. Tom's heart raced as one name caught his eye, a name he'd seen only in old photos, but never fully acknowledged. "What's that?" he whispered, the shadows shifting ominously around him. Jake tugged him closer, oblivious to the internal chaos his father was grappling with. "Looks important. Can we read it?" Tom took a breath, trying to gather himself, knowing well he was closer to unraveling a truth that could either define him or shatter his already fragile reality. Would this reveal a connection that could forge a new understanding, or would it threaten everything he and Jake had just started to build? The next chapter was waiting to unfold, and Tom felt the gravitational pull of his past, ready to unveil profound revelations about family and identity that could forever change their journey. The name on the wall leapt out at Tom, a thunderclap of recognition that fractured the fragile calm he'd been holding on to. It was his father's name, a name he had relegated to the shadows, choosing to remember the man in superficial flashes rather than confront the complicated reality of who he had been. The letters flickered under the museum lights, each stroke of paint igniting a cascade of emotions: anger, disappointment, longing. "Let's read it," Jake urged again, tugging at Tom's sleeve. The innocence in his son's voice was steady, almost grounding, yet it urged Tom to plunge into unknown depths. He felt the weight of his hesitation threatening to pull him under. Was he ready to discover this part of his ancestry? Tom took a reluctant step toward the display, heart racing with trepidation. The engraved words detailed the legacy of a man who had fought in a war, a name stamped into history that bore the weight of both pride and contention. It felt reminiscent of an old book he'd never finished, filled with chapters he feared to revisit. His mind raced with images of family arguments, stories left untold, and emotional wounds that had rarely surfaced. "Dad, what does it say?" Jake's youthful curiosity was unwavering. For a fleeting moment, Tom wanted to shield Jake from this chapter, the tangled history that encompassed their family, but he had vowed to be different, braver. "It tells about my father, your grandpa." His voice was a mere whisper, the tremor barely contained. "He did some hard things, and it complicated how I grew up." "Like how you are being brave now?" The directness of Jake's analogy struck Tom again, a mirror reflecting the essence of courage he was grasping for as an adult. Tom turned to his son and saw that Jake was not afraid. It was a refreshing perspective. Whereas Tom had built walls around his vulnerabilities, Jake stood unafraid before a manifestation of his history. Yes, but it's also scary. There's a lot to unpack when you learn that the past isn't always what you thought. Tom's breath quickened as he grappled with the paradox of fear and love. He feared the hurt, but loved the possibility of healing. Could the connection he had shunned unlock a deeper bond with Jake? "Do you want to know more?" he asked, surprised at the clarity he found in his own question. Jake nodded vigorously, eyes wide with possibility. Instead of retreating back into the safety of non-communication, Tom felt an innate pull towards transparency. "All right, let's see what else we can find." As they explored the rest of the exhibit together, Tom cataloged memories, comments from family and friends, pieces of his father's life that had once stood in murky shadows. It was a weed of truth slowly breaking through the concrete of denial. With each revelation, Tom's heart raced not only with discovery, but with an emerging determination. He would not be defined by the mistakes of his past. Lost in thought, Tom's mind whirled with the implications of what he was doing. What he once avoided was now essential, a binding thread in his quest to understand his own shortcomings as a father, how those past traumas intertwined with his son's present. "Dad?" Jake interrupted his thoughts, mirroring his earlier enthusiasm. "Look at this artifact. I think it belonged to an astronaut." Tom dragged his gaze from the familial history to where Jake was pointing. The vibrant display drew Tom in, a new facet of discovery emerging. He wondered about bravery again, the bravery of those who reached into the vast unknown, like his father and like himself, initiating a process of unraveling. As he turned to Jake, the museum ephemeral around them, he contemplated the idea that perhaps this journey was more than historical. It could become a crucible for change, a place to confront their legacy and redefine what it meant to be a father. Challenges lay before them, shining through the layers of history even if they'd remain untold for now. There was no turning back, only the path ahead, laden with revelations that would either unite or fracture them further. What else would they discover together in this labyrinth of the past, a place that could rewrite their story? Tom felt the familiar tension. He was faced with the decision to forge ahead into difficult truths or retreat into obscurity. The stakes were rising, and with the gravity of his choices weighing on him, Tom sensed the critical moment was fast approaching. It loomed before him like an undiscovered galaxy, waiting to explode into clarity, eager to unveil how his destiny, and Jake's, might change. "Are you ready to keep looking, Jake?" he asked, the apprehension mixing with resolve in his chest. "Yes, let's go," Jake chimed enthusiastically, and as they ventured deeper into the exhibit, Tom felt the pull of an unseen force, an uncharted territory of truth ready to explode with implications that could transform everything. As they moved deeper into the exhibit, the air seemed to change, thickening with a strange blend of nostalgia and urgency. The dim lighting cast shadows that danced across Tom's thoughts, lifting memories he'd buried under years of indifference. Each placard they approached began to resonate like distant echoes of a past he'd skirted for too long. "Dad, what about this one?" Jake pointed, his enthusiasm unflagging. Tom followed his son's eager finger to a display that featured photographs of soldiers. The proud, attentive faces looked back at him, some reminding him of his father, hard-eyed and resolute. Yet behind those faces were untold stories of pain, sacrifice, and struggles that often overshadowed the nobility of service. "This is... well, it's complicated," Tom muttered. He could almost hear his father's voice, rigid, demanding, audacious, to be the embodiment of honor. The juxtaposition of admiration and resentment twisted in his chest. The need to unpack those feelings, to elevate the shadows into light, had never been so palpable. "Why is it complicated, Dad?" Jake's question landed heavily, a gentle but unrelenting force nudging Tom toward a revelation he had resisted. "Because," he took a deep breath, "I've always focused on the heroism without understanding the cost." For the first time, the truth about his father's legacy felt like a double-edged sword, valuable yet perilous. He had to navigate this terrain carefully, not just for him but for Jake. How could he shield his son from the harsh realities of their family narrative, while also giving him the strength to confront them. Tom paused, overwhelmed. He closed his eyes for a fleeting moment, savoring the innocence radiating from Jake. Perhaps in exposing this convoluted history, he could guide his son toward understanding that valiance doesn't equate to perfection. But what about the flaws and failures that came with it? "Let's take a break," Tom suggested suddenly. This was heavier than he anticipated, a tidal wave of emotions crashing over the shore of his cautious resolve. He led Jake away from the display, seeking a quieter corner of the museum. "Are you okay, Dad?" Jake asked, concern suddenly overtaking his earlier exuberance. "I thought you wanted to see everything." Tom knew he needed to regroup. "I do. It's just a lot to digest. Can I share something personal with you, Jake?" His son nodded earnestly, his trust infusing Tom with renewed strength. "Good. I want you to know that the story of your grandpa isn't just about his achievements. It's about his choices, too. The mistakes he made shaped who I became, and I want to ensure you don't face the same pitfalls." It was an important distinction. The responsibility of breaking the cycle pressed heavily on his shoulders. As much as he wanted to delve into the lineage of valor and honor, the shadows of despair and regret called for just as much attention. "There's beauty in understanding our flaws, Jake. They can teach us resilience." "I get it. Like how you are trying to be brave now." Jake smiled, the sun of innocence breaking through Tom's stormy cloud of doubts. "Yes," Tom nodded, the connection vibrating with significance. Just then, a massive display caught their attention. An intricate diorama of a battlefield. Real artifacts surrounded the scene, merging reality with historical perspectives. The danger of glorifying war loomed like a palpable ghost. "Dad, look, that helmet. What if it belonged to someone like you?" Jake exclaimed, innocence reframing the weight of history in a different light. Tom felt the prick of concern. Was he allowing his son to romanticize the very struggles of their lineage? "Maybe it did," he replied abstractly, grappling with the concept as he watched Jake's face light up. "But remember, it's vital to understand the sacrifices behind it, not just the accolades." A myriad of thoughts danced in Tom's mind, swirling in a cyclone of purpose. This exploration presented an opportunity, not just to illuminate the darkness of his father's past, but also to mold a path for Jake that prioritized empathy over valor without the gloss of heroism. Tom's heart raced as he considered this journey. "Let's move to the next section," Tom said, steeling himself for the truth that waited in the shadows. "There's a lot more to see." As they approached the next exhibit, he sensed the stakes rising, both for himself and for Jake. He understood now that peeling back layers of history was not simply a narrative to be retold. It was a breakthrough waiting to unfold. A sudden thought struck him. What revelations lay ahead? Would uncovering the complexities lead to inevitably clearer reflections on their family relationship? Or would the truth shatter the fragile foundation he'd taken for granted? "Dad, are you really ready for what's next?" Jake asked, genuine concern etching his lovely young features. Tom forced a smile, aligning his thoughts with his growing determination. It was time to confront these ghosts, not just for himself, but for Jake. "Yes, I am," he declared, standing firmly. "The truth matters, regardless of how scary it might be." Their tentative exploration forward would determine whether this journey would become a connecting thread for their future, or a fork in the road. Would it bring them triumph or despair? The moment of truth awaited just beyond the turn, an impending revelation echoing in silence, ready to be discovered. As Tom and Jake moved toward the next exhibit, a palpable tension thrummed in the air. Tom felt acutely aware of the weight of history pressing down on him. Each step seemed to echo the choices of generations past. The inconsistencies of valor and reality he now struggled to unravel. He knew they were approaching an area that detailed the psychological impacts of war, a subject he had long avoided, convinced that recognizing such vulnerabilities would weaken the legacy he had idolized. "Do you think they'll have stories about the families left behind?" Jake asked innocently, grasping Tom's hand as they entered the stark room, dimly lit and filled with haunting testimonials. The walls were adorned with letters, photographs, and snippets of life interrupted. Yes, Tom replied softly, unsure whether to feel dread or gratitude. Understanding his father's life, or lack thereof, through the lens of familial fallout, was an unexpected avenue he hadn't anticipated. As they explored the space, Tom began to grasp the importance of those left at home, the silent warriors bearing scars unseen. Flashes of his own childhood fogged with confusion and frustration bubbled to the surface. "What's wrong, Dad?" Jake's voice pulled him from his thoughts, concern etched on his young face. "Nothing I can't handle," Tom lied, forcing a smile. The truth hurt too deeply. The conversations he aborted years ago left wounds unaddressed. He read over a heart-wrenching letter from a soldier, describing the poignant struggle between duty and the pull of home. Each word carved lines in Tom's understanding of his own father, how much the torment of service likely shaped him. But the paradox of pride versus pain was a complicated narrative, one he hesitated to tackle. "Do you think your grandpa felt like that?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tom inhaled sharply, caught off guard. "Yes, I think he did," he admitted, sensing the vulnerability of acknowledgement creeping into their conversation. How many times had he pushed down these feelings, dismissing them as weakness? The sound of armor rattling echoed from a nearby display, drawing their attention to a case containing an old uniform. Bitterness gripped his heart as he confronted another piece of his father's life, a vivid reminder of the man he always admired but hardly understood. "Dad," Jake's voice broke through his reverie once again. "Can we touch it? What if it belonged to someone brave?" Tom considered it for a moment before shaking his head. "Immense bravery often carries a price. You need to understand that with every piece of this history comes a story of sacrifice. You don't always see it, and that's important to remember." As Jake studied the uniform, Tom's mind raced. Could he help his son avoid the pitfalls of adoration without understanding? Was he mere determined to protect him, or far more invested in reshaping his own narrative? He felt the urge to share his own unresolved fears and failures, unsure how to navigate the delicate balance between revelation and preservation. "Dad, why do you look so serious?" Jake asked, his youthful curiosity persistent. "It's just a story, right?" "Just a story." That phrase knotted in Tom's gut as he graphed the distance between the perception of valor and the haunting truths beneath it. "Yes, Jake. But every story comes with its own weight. You've seen how happy I try to make everything. I've only shared the glory and left out suffering. That's not fair to you. Will you tell me the full story someday?" Jake's bright eyes locked onto Tom's, penetrating deeper than he anticipated. Swallowed by the gravity of the promise lie ahead, Tom nodded slowly. "Yes, I'll share it all with you one day. I promise." Together they stood in the dim light, with the shadows of the past swirling around them like a dense fog. Tom realized that this moment marked a pivotal shift, not just in their visit but within himself. As they began to drift towards the next display of photographs, an overwhelming urge seized him. He had spent years avoiding his family's narrative. Yet now, standing with Jake, the burden felt lighter. It was not only his past, but theirs to share, to help them receive the insights of resilience. But just as he was beginning to piece together his thoughts, an unexpected figure stepped from behind the exhibit. An older man whom Tom immediately recognized, the haunting likeness of his father staring back at him. "Tom," the man said. The familiarity in his voice sent a jolt through Tom's spine as he took a small step forward, unsure what else would unfold. "Dad, who is that?" Jake asked, confusion mingling with curiosity. With the shock of recognition still coursing through him, Tom sensed the oncoming wave of confrontation that would close the gap between the past and the present. Would this figure offer clarity, or sink him deeper into the shadows he sought to unravel? "Let's find out," Tom breathed, a mix of determination and dread filling the air between them. This was no longer merely a story waiting to be told. It had transformed into a confrontation that demanded resolution. Tom's feet felt like lead as he confronted the past personified, the years of avoidance colliding with the urgency of the moment. His father's presence filled the air like a dense fog, evoking a myriad of emotions that had long been buried and unaddressed. Jake's small hand slipped into Tom's, grounding him as they faced the specter of legacy. "Can we talk?" the man asked simply, his voice cracking with age and unspoken remorse. There was an earnestness in those eyes, a reflection of the complexities that lay beneath the surface of his former bravado. Tom's breath caught in his throat, a multitude of questions swirling in his mind. The man who had shaped so much of Tom's understanding of fatherhood now stood before him, vulnerable, yet steadfast. It was a meeting ripe with potential for both confrontation and connection. "Why now, after all these years?" Tom finally managed, the weight of his words echoing within the museum walls. "You chose wealth over family." The old man's shoulders slumped, remorse evident in the deep lines etched across his face. "I was young and foolish," he replied, sincerity shining through his voice. "I mistook ambition for love. I thought I was providing for you when I was really just running away from the truth of who I was." Tom felt a surge of pent-up frustration mixed with the glimmers of understanding he had long sought. Here was a chance not only to confront his father, but to learn about the roots of his own shortcomings as a parent. "You missed so much," Tom said, his voice firm yet tinged with pain. "You missed my growing up, every milestone." "But I want to make it right, Tom," his father interrupted, a ripple of desperation lacing his tone. "I've always admired your strength, your resilience. I've watched from afar. I want to know my grandchild, and I want to start over, to share my experiences." Jake, completely unaware of the storm between the two men, watched wide-eyed, embodying a spirit of openness that Tom himself had stifled for years. "Can you tell me about your life? About what you've learned?" Jake asked, his curiosity palpable. A flicker of resoluteness ignited within Tom. His son's unblemished perspective on discovery pushed him to venture toward a raw honesty he had always feared. "Maybe it's time to share," Tom said, addressing both the man standing before him and the boy beside him. "If we're going to create a new legacy, we have to dismantle the barriers of the past." The gravity of that statement settled heavily between them. It was a labyrinthine journey that they were all part of, a tangled web of choices, mistakes, and potential reclamation. "I want to share the full story, and perhaps understand you too," Tom continued, his voice steady. His father took a deep breath, connecting with the added weight of understanding. "I was wrong, and I acknowledge that. I couldn't face my failures then, but if you let me, I want the chance to be part of your life, and Jake's, to help you understand the man I once was, and how I sought to change." Jake looked between the two men, uncertainty dancing with intrigue. "Do you think you can?" he asked innocently, a beacon of hope for a brighter future. Tom glanced down at his son, then back at the man who had caused him so much pain. A feeling of acceptance began to blossom in his chest. "It won't be easy, and trust needs to be rebuilt," Tom replied. "But I believe that understanding is crucial. Perhaps we've been lost in what was instead of what could be." With those words, a sense of empowerment flooded Tom's heart. This was not simply a chance at reconciliation, it was an opportunity for profound growth. They stood on the precipice of transformation, ready to confront the painful truths that forged their family identity. "I'm ready if you are," his father responded, a tremor of vulnerability running through him. "Let's make this new for all of us," Jake declared, a statement that encapsulated the fragile yet resilient hope that bound them together. As they gathered around the exhibit, engaged not only in history, but in the meaningful narrative of their own family story, Tom felt threads of clarity and resolution intertwining. With every shared detail, from triumphs to failures, they began to redefine what it meant to be a family. It wouldn't be instantaneous. Healing and understanding often require time. But beneath the shadows of their past, intertwined a budding recognition of personal and collective strength. Tom had stepped from his darkness into a brightness he had once feared to explore. Walking away from the exhibit, Tom felt bolstered by the conviction of his journey. Here stood generations, ready to rewrite their narrative, to reclaim what had nearly been lost. A lineage bound not merely by blood, but by the common pursuit of understanding and growth. Finally, he held his son's hand tightly, aware that together they would forge a legacy rich in honesty and resilience. a beacon of hope that illuminated even the darkest corners of family history. As they exited the museum, the world outside felt vivid and alive with promise. Tom walked forward, grounded by the knowledge that he had taken monumental steps right there in that moment. It was time for new beginnings, for taking risks under the sun, rather than hiding in the shadows. It was time to embrace the journey of transformation, together. Don't miss this pivotal moment in your journey of self-discovery. Subscribe immediately to the channel for more exclusive emotional stories that will inspire your transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. This is the moment to show your support and keep the journey going. Comment your thoughts and reactions about Tom's evolution in the story, as your insights matter greatly to us. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to embrace their own journeys of overcoming legacy and trauma. You need to share this message with those ready to embrace bravery.